Family business is a vast area. It's a new initiative of the Money Control and CNBC to recognize family businesses. But let me start out with one aspect which was touched along in some of the panels earlier, which was, many Indian business houses or Indian business owners have set up family offices because obviously they have now accumulated a large amount of capital. Now, one of the, as I think Dr. Jitendra Singh said, that India now has the world's third largest number of startups, right? So, and these startups have traditionally relied on capital from venture capital funds and, the famous American venture capital funds in most cases, PE funds and so on. So can Indian family offices emerge as an alternative provider of equity capital or indeed even other kinds of capital to Indian startups?
So first, let me compliment you, Bodhi, and the team at Money Control for recognizing family-owned businesses. This is a category often misunderstood, and the role that they play in the economy, in the overall ecology of the world, actually. It's not just an Indian phenomena, it's not just an Asian phenomena, it is a global phenomena. And India too, well, maybe if you have a question later, I'll talk a little bit about this, why they are, while they're like other businesses, they're also quite unique. So family offices are a somewhat new phenomena in India, while some of the old established businesses did set up offices. One misunderstanding that still exists is that the role of family office is only to provide funding. I think that's a mistake we are making right now. They have a much larger role to play. And in a sense, it's the anchor of the family-owned business.
Right.
There are more and more families across the globe now which are putting their smartest people to manage the family rather than the business. And the family office therefore becomes an even more critical role within the overall family business. So family offices have already become an important source of funding, but they will not be the only source. So angel networks, VC funds for larger enterprises, private equity, all of them will remain in play. But increasingly, the role being played by family offices is critical because it's not just money. It's also a huge amount of expertise and mentorship that's available to the early stage companies.
Are there any regulatory changes which you would like to see to make family offices, make things easier for family offices?
Many, not just a few actually. So some years ago, I had taken a note to Arun Jaitley to encourage early stage companies and startup companies. And it had, I'm trying to remember, it had some 28 points on it. So after a few days, he called me saying, I've had a conversation, the Prime Minister is very happy, we are thinking of announcing this as a startup policy of India. I said, this is fantastic. As a country, one of our single biggest challenges is sustainable economic opportunities and jobs. Because the 250 million people who are still living in poverty, there's no magic wand that you have. And job creation is not done by large enterprises world over, by the way, because their attempt is to build more efficiency, more productivity, more automation, more robotics, thereby cutting down on jobs. But in the ecosystem that they create of small enterprises, mid-sized enterprises, and new enterprises, that's where all the jobs are. And you need those as a country. So he said, we're going to launch this scheme, and we're going to pick 12 things from this list, or 14 things. I said, why the hell would you pick only 12 or 14? Why not all 28 points? He's saying, yes, sarkar hai, aste aste ho jayega. So they did announce the scheme, and the scheme actually did pretty well. But pretty soon there was a pushback from these early stage companies saying, things are not okay. You need to look at the regulation. So I'm not talking of only the startups, but a lot of that is to do with the supporters and the funders of startups, which is the family offices. Now, the family offices, as I was saying, have actually a much bigger role in my mind, is maintaining balance in the family, ensuring the culture of the family is maintained, because very often we forget the big role of families is not only to run a business. It is to be the custodians of the culture of the family, which then must be passed on generation after generation after generation, thereby creating some kind of order in families, because you have a built-in conflict. By its very nature, families are socialist. By its very nature, business is not.
Right.
It's capitalist in its nature. So there's a built-in conflict already. So the family office actually is supposed to play that role as the single most important role to maintain the balance between the two.
So let me then get into that. You of course belong to a storied business family. So are Indian family offices actually doing that, or are we still in the very, very early stages?
No, absolutely. You know, the interesting thing I'll tell you, and I see some of the bankers out here, we said we will get some advisors to work with us. We called 14 of the top so-called family office experts to make pitches to us.
Right.
Not one was doing the full role of a family office. And which was a bit sad for me. It was a bit of a surprise, but it was also a little bit sad. So we decided we would do everything ourselves. So whether it's to provide legal services within the organization, whether it's to provide the balance as I was talking about, there's many nuanced things that a family office is expected to do, not just be only a funder. The funding bit is being done exceedingly well, I have to say. That part has become, it's on a roll right now, because some of the families saw that those who funded early stage companies in the early days, some of them did exceedingly well. Some of them became very public, and that became a thing to do. It actually became fashionable. So I don't know of any family amongst my friends where one of the youngsters is not saying, oh, I want to do this new business. I want to invest in this, or I want to do this myself. So I'm glad it's fashionable, because we need to encourage more and more of this, but not only this.
So basically the ecosystem in India is quite weak. The legal system and other kinds of ecosystem are quite weak in India, you're saying right now. So let me, you've been, again, you've been part of a family settlement of the Hero Group, which was done several years back. You were also an investor in some startups in e-commerce and all that, and you may not want to talk about which particular ones. But from your long experience as a member of one of India's foremost business families, being part of the family settlement, what is the advice that you would give to people who are now setting up companies, who are founders, who are company founders? What is the advice that you would give them? What are the learnings?
So you have asked a question which can take about a week to answer, by the way. But I'll tell you the two things I think which do matter. One is communication. The importance of communication is often not understood enough. Within families, now I'm going back to family business first, and then I'll come to the startups, because they are two different animals. Within families, we tend often not to share everything, either because we feel the other person may not be able to hold the confidence, or we don't have confidence in that individual herself or himself. Also, when differences spring up in families, as they often do between any 2 or 3 or 4 people, if you have an open communication channel, especially between different generations, and especially between working and non-business working members, I think many things get resolved at a very early stage through open communication. The issues are not very different, and I've studied this subject world over for the last 30, 35 years. The issues are, oh, so-and-so's daughter-in-law's got a more expensive jewelry set or a shawl, or so-and-so's home is bigger than mine, or this one's kid had a wedding which was a bigger splash than the other wedding. So these are actually, most of it are human issues, and they need to be handled differently from business issues, but they do need to be handled. And if you can maintain open communication, I think you would have done yourself a great service. And the second point that you spoke about startups is the startups need to remember that they are building a business where it's not just themselves as founders, but a large number of people who will get engaged and involved in the business. Therefore, governance is the key. Good process is important. Ensuring that you're structured right is critical, especially and even at the early days, which again we feel that, oh, it's only a startup, we can fix it later on. Startup in any case is like, jumping out of a plane without a parachute and trying to construct a parachute, hoping before you hit the ground, the damn thing will open up and you'll have a soft landing. They have a hard enough life as is. So if the process around them and the ecosystem around them can be made a little bit better, I think that will reduce some of the friction that currently exists. Industry in India has, in any case, worked in a tough environment, as you know. And for startups, they do not have either the expertise or the resource to be able to constantly push against the system, which requires you constantly to be responding to queries and questions and forms to be filled out.
Okay. So let me ask you, you also have an interest in corporate governance. So again, this question, again, there was a reference in one of the earlier panels to some of the failures of startups, especially a couple of, I don't want to put the names, but they're well known in the edtech sector in terms of, and possibly the reason for that, and please step in if I'm wrong, is that the startup founder was really is a larger than life personality, and there's really no one to say or to contradict him. There was no second line of leadership. By the way, this need not be a phenomenon which happens only in startups, can happen in old economy companies as well. But again, what is your take on that? What would you advise? What are the structures that can be put in place in the context of startups or even otherwise?
We run a university just outside Delhi. We set it up in my father's name. And we've done some unusual stuff there. It's set up like an American liberal arts university. But we made 5 of the electives compulsory for everybody. The first compulsory elective is ethics and moral dilemma. When it was suggested, our own teams pushed back saying, oh, this is not supposed to be taught in college. I said, I agree. It's not supposed to be taught in school either. You're supposed to learn it when you're 2 years old, looking at the way people around you behave. But is there a problem or is there not? And if there is, and we can do just a little bit to help, I think that would be a great public service. So it's not a startup phenomena. It is a phenomena. So we have a serious issue right now because this is a cultural issue and it's also a little bit of an inherited issue. Because we are coming from a system where a small minority was trying to run a country that was against them. And I'm now talking of British times, by the way.
Right.
So every regulation in India was designed assuming you're going to do the wrong thing. So there's patent mistrust in our entire regulation system. When we started off as an Indian government, we continued with the same system. It's only now that we've started to address saying self-attestation is okay. Otherwise, if you remember, not too far back, you had to go and get a form that you filled up. You needed a gazetted officer to sign that you're saying that you are saying the right thing. I think it's stupid for us to not believe in ourselves as a country. I think as a nation, and this is one of the big moves I think that we need to do, we need to build trust-based systems which are easy, which are transparent, which are open, but which crack down hard and impartially when there is something that is crooked. Malintent is the only thing that should be punished, not mistakes. We end up clubbing all of them together right now. Mistakes only need to be corrected.
Okay, we have a hard stop in about 5 minutes.
But you're right that many startups have earned this reputation of being very poorly governed, which is actually also scared of some of the funding investors and financing institutions. They've started to lie low, or they've started to become very, very selective. They will ask 20 questions before they're willing to write a check now. Very different from the way they were when this started. Maybe it's a good thing, actually.
Yeah. Okay, we have a hard stop in about 5 minutes, so I'll just go through a couple of quick questions. One is, again, coming back to family offices, there is a perception that Gen X is, the next generation really, is not that interested in running particularly old economy companies. What are your views? Is this correct?
So 2 different aspects. One, there's enough research now across the globe to show that about 94% businesses destroy themselves. I'm talking only family-owned businesses. They will destroy themselves and the business by the third generation. And by the way, even by the second generation, that number is well over 60%. Part of it is because the bringing up is different. When the first generation struggles, they actually go and create these enterprises. The second generation often grows up in an environment which is already wealthy, and often they become entitled. And that is a very dangerous thing. And that entitlement then puts them in a position where they become choosy. I will do this and I will not do this. And it's not across all the enterprises, but it has been seen in many cases where they say, I want to do something, but I want to do something new. And in today's time and age, that new stuff is new age, is tech different. In some sense, I would say they are also right because they have much more exposure to technology. They are tech native citizens. They're born in that environment. They grow up in that environment. For them, this is self-evident. For us, we still have to learn this stuff.
Right.
So it's a little bit of, you have to look at the coin on two sides.
Right. Okay, one last question. You've been a past president of CI, you've been on many committees, the Narsimhan committee of 30 years back, the Kelkar committee. So in the context of what's happening in the US, does India need its own Doge?
So does Indian government system and spending need to become more efficient? Of course it does. But do you need a separate office for that? You know, this is a debate we've had ongoing since the early 90s, since the reform program began, is to simplify things. Should you put another committee? Or should you cut back? There was an interesting conversation one day, I remember, which was going to be designed exactly only for this. That let's create a committee which will help us cut down the regulations. I said, what about guys already in there? Why don't you pick some of those and give this role to them? They are the experts. They already know what they're doing, and they would also be best positioned. In Missouri, interestingly, they started a program on this for the bureaucrats who get trained there to how to bring down regulation was being taught. So I do think we need, there was let me roll back a little bit. McKinsey, BCG, Bain, all the big consulting firms have worked with either state governments or central government to bring in productivity, efficiency, improvement, better spend in many of the departments. And some of it actually has been pretty good work. Can we do it ourselves? Probably can. But we are so used to the current system that it always needs a little bit of a shake-up for us to relook at stuff. This very Prime Minister, when he came, if you remember, the first thing he said was very interesting. He said, we want less government and more governance. Yeah. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how much of that have we got?
Right. Minimum government, maximum governance was the words. Right. One last, okay, I think we are out of time, so let's wind up. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Munjal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.